Good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome. Good morning. Welcome. My name is Su Ling Ching, and I have the honor of serving as the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade. On behalf of Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, the Ottawa Board of Trade, and the Ottawa Business Journal, welcome to the Mayor's Breakfast. We're so happy to have you here. Michael Curran, who's the president and publisher of the Ottawa Business Journal, sends his regrets this morning. He is chairing the International Conference of Business Journals, which is being hosted right here in Ottawa, and a great example of our growing global profile. So, thank you for being here, gathered in the heart of our city at City Hall in beautiful downtown Ottawa. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose people have lived on and cared for this land for thousands of years. We honor their enduring relationship with this land, and we recognize the contributions of all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples to our community, past and present. If you're sharing on social this morning, our hashtag is @MayorBeFast. That's OTT MayorBeFast, and please do. A warm welcome this morning to a brand new Ottawa Board of Trade board member, a newly elected as of last night, Krista Keeley of the Ottawa International Airport. Welcome this morning. And please join me in acknowledging our dedicated city councillors who have joined us here this morning: Councillor DeRoche, Councillor Hill, Councillor Hubley, Councillor King, Councillor Carr, Councillor Plante, Councillor Tierney, and Councillor Troster. Thank you for your continued leadership. I would also like to recognize our very important OBOT ambassadors led by Linda McCallum. Please welcome John Nelson, Jeff Schneider, Walter Noble, Gerald Goldsmith, and David Dunlop. And thank you so much for championing our members and helping to strengthen our network. I know, it's a lot of clapping. A sincere thank you to our pillar partners who have joined us this morning, Enbridge, Gas, and Hydro Ottawa, for your leadership in elevating our advocacy and economic development efforts on behalf of all business sectors across the city. And finally, a warm welcome to Mark Monahan, the Executive Director of Ottawa Bluesfest, as our special guest this morning, and an icon in Ottawa's cultural scene, a leader for educating us on how music, festivals, and creativity play a vital role in our city's vibrancy and economic vitality. Welcome. It's been another dynamic month here at the Board of Trade, and for our business community and our economic partners. I can honestly say one defined by bold leadership, shared purpose, and united action. This month, we launched the inaugural Ottawa Energy Symposium, a new platform to convene stakeholders across sectors and ensure that we have the energy capacity and strategy needed to power our growth. I want to say thank you to Hydro Ottawa, Brookfield Renewable, Enbridge, and KPMG for making that possible, and to Mayor Sutcliffe, Councillor Curry, and Councillor Dudas for participating and showing their support in this critical matter. On the global stage, we were honored to collaborate with the Vancouver Board of Trade, the Ontario Chamber, and others in the B7 Business Communique presented at the Canadian Chamber-hosted B7 Summit right here in Ottawa, and shaping Canada's voice at the recent G7 in Alberta. We continue to grow our strategic collaboration with our Ottawa and limited partners at Invest Ottawa and Ottawa Tourism, including presentations at the City Nation Place Americas, which is a premier economic development conference that we helped bring to Canada for the first time in a decade. We remain deeply focused on the Downtown Ottawa Action Agenda, working alongside our downtown champions and the implementation table to accelerate transformation in the heart of our capital. And we also co-presented a letter of support for Lansdowne 2.0, inviting business leaders to join us in backing this catalytic investment ahead of Council's decision in the fall. What a successful inaugural Ottawa Innovation Week we had, with over 80 events across the city celebrating the bold thinkers and change makers who are driving progress in every sector. We met with the National Capital Region Caucus alongside key partners like the Ottawa International Airport Authority and the Gatineau Chamber to determine our shared regional priorities for the upcoming federal term. We feel very optimistic about their early engagement and eagerness for action. Finally, we capped off this powerful month with the Ottawa Board of Trade Annual General Meeting held at the stunning NCC River House, a venue that perfectly symbolizes the connection between our city's beautiful nature and its bold future. It was an evening to reflect on the extraordinary contributions of our members, our volunteers and partners, whose leadership is shaping Ottawa's economic landscape and future. We celebrated the progress we've made together from policy wins to partnership growth and proudly welcomed a new board of directors, a diverse and dedicated group of leaders committed to advancing our shared agenda in city building, business success, and inclusive economic growth. For over 168 years, the Ottawa Board of Trade has been a mechanism for galvanizing business and community leaders, including public officials, toward a shared vision, and that work has never been more important. We are very well positioned to reach our full potential as a G7 nation and set an example of strong leadership, bold innovation, and inclusive prosperity for the world to see. We invite all of you to be involved. As we kick off this morning's breakfast, let's recognize the wonderful organizations that support this speaker series. Our lead sponsor, Hydro Ottawa, our presenting sponsor, Edelman, Algonquin College, the Westin Ottawa, RBC, Commissionaires Ottawa, Enbridge, Ottawa Senators Hockey Club, our global partners, Oakwood and the Casino Lac Leamy, our AV partner, Ottawa Print Services, our speaker, gift sponsor, Inman Harden, our coffee sponsor, Capital Office Interiors, and our breakfast sponsor, Collège La Cité. Can I have a warm round of applause for all of our sponsors? It is now my pleasure to welcome our presenting sponsor today, from Edelman, Darcy Walsh, General Manager, Ottawa, and President, Public and Government Affairs, Canada. Darcy.
Good morning, everybody. Well, trying to introduce an icon. I don't know if I've ever actually done that before, but Mark, usually we find ourselves down here talking to Tim and Alan and the mayor about other things, but not too much about Edelman. It has been 10 years since we opened the office, and 43 people later, and our newest colleague, Graham Richardson, which most of you know, here with me this morning, so it's great to have you here, Graham. It truly is about Mark and what he's done for the city, and one of the reasons I joined Edelman was because Edelman's flexibility and desire for you to do more in the community and to support people. And Mark is one of those people. What Mark has done for this city and putting the city on the map as it relates to music, and I see Aaron here. Aaron and I have been able to support Mark on the board for several years. I'm not sure what questions the mayor is going to ask this morning, but I can tell you that putting Ottawa on the map has been no easy task. 250,000 people through the gates every year, and it's just not about Bluesfest, City Folk, Festival of Small Halls. Mark has changed the music industry in Ottawa, and we're lucky to have him. We're just on the eve of a new festival coming up, which I'm sure most of you will get to. So enough from me. Mark, thanks for all that you do. Two Marks, actually. I guess we can say thank you to both of you. But Mark Monahan, thanks for all that you've done for the city and getting music going here and keeping it going, because it is no small task with lots of challenges that continue to pop up and change every year as the festival nears. So Mark, thank you again, and Mayor Sutcliffe, nice to see you, and thank you for having us. And of course, one final thanks to Sue Ling and to her whole team as we finish the first half of the Mayor's series and we break for summer. Thanks for putting us all together once a month for a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy, and to your whole Graham and your whole team at Edelman for your support in sponsoring city building initiatives like Bluesfest and this Mayor Series. Before I introduce the Mayor, I'm privileged this morning to be joined by the Governor General's Foot Guards and Ceremonial Guards. Personnel for the Ceremonial Guard and the band come from many units across Canada, upholding the traditions of the changing of the Guard Parade while proudly wearing the uniforms of the Governor General's Foot Guards and the Canadian Grenadier Guards. The changing of the Guard Parade has been conducted every summer on Parliament Hill since 1959 and provides a dash of color and pageantry for our national capital, while also getting tourists out of their hotel rooms and on the streets for the 10 a.m. parade. As you all well know, the traditional parade was put on hold by COVID, and this summer, the ceremonial guard is once again parading with troops on the streets of Ottawa, and the Canadian Army is delighted to support this transition. We are excited to see them all back on July 1st, 2025. Please enjoy a presentation from the Guard. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the podium His Worship Mayor Mark Sutcliffe.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again to the Governor General's Foot Guards. Great to have you with us this morning. It's a pleasure to welcome you to City Hall. Thank you to the leadership and the members of the Foot Guards who are part of an enormous and really valued tradition in our community. Big tourist attraction, and great to see that the numbers are growing, and you're going to have an increased presence on the streets of Ottawa starting on July the 1st. I speak to tourists and visitors to our city all the time, and it is a cherished tradition for people to see the changing of the Guard and to see the colors on the streets of Ottawa. So thank you again for being here this morning and for everything you do. We appreciate it. So we have a great guest lined up for you today, of course, an icon, as he was described earlier, an icon. This is our final edition, of course, of the Mayor's Breakfast before we break for until September. I hope everybody's looking forward to the summer. Summers are always great in Ottawa because of Bluesfest and many other things happening in our city. La Fête du Canada approche et elle pourrait bien être l'une des plus grandes célébrations de l'histoire de notre pays. Canada Day is coming up, and it could be one of the biggest celebrations ever in our country. We could see a lot of national pride on display this year on July the 1st. We have, in addition to Bluesfest, many other music festivals and other festivals to look forward to this summer. And there's lots of sports happening in our city with the Red Blacks, the Ottawa Titans, Atletico Ottawa, Ottawa Rapid FC. And I'm really happy to see our friends from Ottawa Tourism here today and the Ottawa Airport. I have heard that the tourism industry was very strong in May and in June as well this year. Things are going very well lately. And as you know, tourism is vitally, vitally important to our local economy and to our city. Ici à la Ville, nous travaillons sur plusieurs priorités très importantes. We're working on a number of important priorities at the city, including housing and public safety, economic development, and more. And I recently met with Prime Minister Mark Carney, and we agreed to address many of Ottawa's priorities by working together. We're making progress in a couple of other areas as well that I wanted to share with you this morning. And you may remember that when I ran for mayor 3 years ago, at the time in 2022, there were a lot of concerns about public safety, including the fact that there were a huge number of level 0 days in Ottawa. Those are days when there are no ambulances available because they're all with patients. The paramedics are all with patients at the hospital. So we have great news that we have actually reduced the number of level 0 days in Ottawa in 2024 by 79%. That's very significant. We've also reduced the offload delays in hospitals by nearly 23%. We have more paramedics that we've hired. We're addressing systems. We're reducing the offload delays so that we are able to put paramedics back in the community faster to serve the public. So we still have a lot of work ahead, but this is a major step forward in ensuring that residents get help quickly when they need it most. We also hired more than 130 police officers in the last year. That's an important step toward improving public safety in a rapidly growing community. Il y a donc beaucoup d'élan positif dans notre ville en ce moment. So there's a lot of positive momentum in our city right now, and we are, my colleagues on City Council who are here today, and we are all committed to continuing this hard work on behalf of our residents. Je suis déterminé à poursuivre ce travail important au service de tous les résidents d'Ottawa. So great to see so many of my colleagues here with me today. So did you know Ottawa is home to 120 festivals, 120 festivals in Ottawa. Chaque année, les festivals génèrent plus de 200 millions de dollars de dépenses directes à travers notre ville. Every year, festivals generate over $200 million in direct spending across our city. That translates into jobs for our residents. And I want to recognize Tara Shannon, who is here today. Tara's there, the new executive director of the Ottawa Festival Network. Great to see you, Tara, and thank you for taking this on. You're doing a great job, and the sector is so vitally important to our city and to tourism. And we're grateful to everyone in the festival community, everyone throughout the tourism industry for what they contribute to our city. And I don't have to tell you, there is no more important or no bigger festival in Ottawa than Bluesfest. And Bluesfest was created, as you all know, by Mark Monahan, a true visionary in our arts and culture scene. And under Mark's leadership, Bluesfest has grown from a small local event into truly one of Canada's premier music festivals, one of North America's premier music festivals, attracting world-class talent, hundreds of thousands of attendees each year. And Bluesfest isn't just a concert series, it's so much more than that. It's an economic powerhouse for our city. It supports tourism, it energizes local businesses, it creates jobs, it inspires young musicians, it's connected to the community throughout the year. And of course, Bluesfest is just one small part of Mark's contribution to our city. He's also the driving force behind City Folk and many other initiatives that ensure that Ottawa is a destination for live music year-round. So please join me in welcoming Mark Monahan. Okay, so you've already been called an icon this morning. That's a good thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's actually starting to scare me because these accolades are a bit unsettling. I'm not done yet.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'm relieved. We want you to keep going. We want you to keep going. So, you know, Bluesfest has been around now for more than 30 years, and it's such a part of Ottawa now that it's almost impossible to remember when there wasn't a Blues Fest. But take us back to that time. And first of all, what were you doing before Blues Fest? And how did you conceive of the idea of having this amazing music festival in our city?
Sure. So I grew up here in Ottawa. Grew up in the Alta Vista area. I went to Carleton, went to Ridgemont, and coming out of Carleton, I was always sort of a closet musician, but I realized that probably wasn't going to make much of a living for me. So I decided to try to do something in business, ideally a music business. I went into partnership with a couple of restaurateurs, and we actually ran 292 Elgin as the Penguin Club in the late 80s, early 90s, and then turned it into a restaurant called Bravo Bravo. So I was in the restaurant business for about 12 years. And during that time, the live music part of it, we ran the upstairs as a live music club for about 5 years, and that was my introduction to the music business. And in the early 90s, around that time, Barry Morris had just gone under, which was about 91 or 92. Rainbow had started. Zaphod Beeblebrox, Eugene Haslam was starting. So there was a lot happening and not happening in the music scene. But in 94, 93, 94, we had done a partnership with the Ottawa Jazz Festival at that time, which was still in the same place. And I started thinking about starting a popular music festival and why you would have to, basically pigeonhole yourself as one genre. So although Bluesfest came to mind because there was no other Bluesfest in Canada, the concept was to bring in popular music and pattern after what we were doing at the nightclub.
And I read that you kind of observed at the Jazz Festival that they were able to bring out more people in a weekend than you were bringing out over the course of months at your club, right? And you sort of had this idea that maybe there was room for more of that kind of activity in Ottawa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am a jazz fan, probably more so a blues fan, but at the club, I realized jazz year-round was not an extremely popular type of music at the club level. So I thought, geez, if they can bring out tens of thousands of fans to a summer music festival, what could we do if we actually programmed popular music?
So it sounds like your vision for Bluesfest, when you conceived of it, was very similar to how it turned out, which is not always the case, right? You can have a vision for something and then adapt over time based on how the market responds. But it sounds like you had a vision for the music festival that we actually have today.
Yes, it was very much, it evolved from that initial idea, but along the way, one of the major influences I had early on, I think the second year in 95 or 96, I went to see the New Orleans Jazz Festival. And New Orleans Jazz Festival at that time still is one of the iconic music festivals in the world and really is a multi-stage, multi-genre event. I mean, I was blown away. They had a gospel tent, which we introduced later on. They had, they were bringing in the Dave Matthews Band. They were bringing in Bruce Springsteen. So it really was just an eye-opener to see what you could create if you had that concept.
I've heard you talk about this before, but as much as you deserve credit for having the vision for this and enormous credit for implementing it, because a lot of it is in the implementation, you went around and looked at other music festivals and you borrowed the best ideas from them, right? Which is one of the secrets to the success of any venture or business or initiative is you've got to adopt the best practices that you observe elsewhere, right?
Yeah, I think starting something is always challenging, and sometimes we're afraid of our own abilities. Sometimes we say, how could we do this? And sometimes that leads to more of an insular approach to it. My approach was to go around and see the best festivals in the world and try and figure out what they're doing and how they're doing it. So New Orleans Jazz was one. The Montreal Jazz Festival was another. This was before the advent of Coachella or Bonnaroo or Austin City Limits, but eventually I went to them as well. But also my idea was to connect with mentors. So I sought out Quint Davis from New Orleans Jazz Festival. One of my biggest mentors initially was Andre Menard, one of the founders of the Montreal Jazz Festival. And he helped introduce me to a lot of the agents that the Montreal Jazz Festival was working with, and in fact, led me to book probably our biggest headliner at the time, Ray Charles.
Can you talk more about the role of mentorship? Because this is something that I've spoken to many different leaders about, and it's amazing how much you can learn from others, and often for free, people who are just willing to share their wisdom. And I know it's been really important for you, and you would like to see that passed on to the next generation of leaders in the arts and culture scene in our community.
Yeah, so much of what I did was influenced by others that had done it better or earlier than I did. So like I mentioned, Andre Menard. Another big influence was a fellow named Bob Babish, who started the Milwaukee Summerfest, which is one of the biggest music festivals in the United States. But really it was getting beyond the idea that these people were untouchables. And I was always interested in reaching out to some folks. Some I never returned my call, but those that did seemed to be willing to share a lot of information that you would think, you know, would be sort of proprietary. But they were very open to that, and that has influenced also my approach now to a lot of younger people. We have a staff of 18 full-time staff, which, again, it's nice to get all the accolades myself, but so much of what's gone on has been because of the staff, the board members. Some are here, like Darcy and Aaron. But just trying to encourage younger people, like I was encouraged when I started, is a tremendous gift you can give. And I think it's something that the city and all of us should welcome.
Absolutely. So take us back to 1994. That was the year of the first Bluesfest. Just describe that event to us in comparison to what we know today as this massive event that brings out hundreds of thousands of people. The budget that year, I think, was $100,000. Is that right?
Yeah, the budget was $100,000, probably just under $100,000. I mean, we didn't have any money. We had $15,000 in seed money, which didn't go too far. But the artist budget was just under 50 grand. The headliners that year were Clarence Clements, who was Bruce Springsteen's sax player. He had his own band. Buckwheat Zydeco, and Randy Bachman. So
not bad. Not
yeah,
bad for
not
yeah,
bad.
Yeah, for a small budget. Yeah, that's great.
I actually found recently a ticket, but we had cut up cardboard tickets. They were printed on a photocopier, and it was $4 in advance and $5 at the gate. So
And if you had one of those tickets this year, could you use it with that?
you could try.
Yeah, okay.
You could try. Yeah. But yeah, so it was a low budget. My biggest recollection was, look, I had no idea how to run a music festival. I had some great people that I was working with, but I remember just being sort of in awe. Now, if you've ever met Clarence Clements, he's about 6'6". I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but I remember Clarence Clements showing up, and it was chaos, okay? We were not ready. It was Friday afternoon, and Clarence Clements showed up, and I went to say hi, and he says, hey, is there any place around here I can get a nice bottle of wine? And we were at Majors Hill Park, which we rented the first year for $250, okay? And it was, pleasantly surprised. I phoned up someone and found the person. His name was Mark Corriveau, who was in charge of the land use at the NCC, and I said, I'd like to rent Majors Hill Park. And he says, yeah, when would you like it? And I said, well, around Canada Day. He says, yeah, no problem. And I said, well, he goes, you'll have to come down to the office and sign, an application. And I said, that's fine. And I met with him, and he said, well, bring a check for $250, which I did. That was about all I had at the moment. But we rented Majors Hill for $250. Clarence Clements shows up and says, where can I get a nice bottle of wine? And I said, look, there's a vintages store in the market. He goes, well, could you show me where it is? And so I remember walking through the market with this 6'6" guy, going to Vintages on Dalhousie Street and buying him 3 or 4 bottles of nice Burgundy, okay? that he brought back to the park that night. And for one moment, I just parked all of the stress that was going on, and I just enjoyed the moment, of actually meeting this guy who I never thought we'd have in the city, and giving him a few bottles of wine to drink.
That's a great story. So, did you know at that time, describe how it went, and did you know at that time, hey, we're onto something here. We can build this. We can add more dates. We can attract bigger artists and bigger crowds.
Yeah, what was surprising is that, look, people came out. It was primarily people walking up at the gate. We had a decent weekend. I remember Saturday night.
So you got that extra $1 from them then?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they didn't
I
buy in
learned to
advance.
charge more at the gate. And Saturday night, I remember it was threatening. It was raining sort of late afternoon, and I was thinking, oh, God, this is... Buckwheat Zydeco was playing, one of my favorite bands. And I remember sort of around 7 o'clock, it had been raining. It started to clear up. And just as magic, people started to walk up to the gate. And when Buckwheat went on, I remember standing there, and people were kind of wet and drizzly, but he played his version of Beast of Burden, which is a fantastic song, a Zydeco version of it, and just thinking, wow, this is just phenomenal. It's just sort of a light bulb went off about creating some magic that people would appreciate.
Over the course of the next few years, was there a major milestone or a major turning point where you thought, okay, this is really taking off and we're going to another level?
Yeah, I'd say 98, 4 years in, we had sort of struggled along for a few years. And again, through my connection with Andre Menard at the Jazz Festival, we arranged to bring in Ray Charles, which I had no idea how popular he would be. And it really, the light bulb again went on because suddenly we paid more than we ever had for a headliner. His fee at that time, I think, was $35,000 US. And we took a huge gamble. He sold out. We had moved to Confederation Park. And he sold, I remember we had sold about 5,000 tickets. And the challenge was, back then, you see, we were selling tickets on Ticketmaster, and you didn't get the money until after the event had happened. There was no advances, and we had to figure out how we're going to get the money to pay him, because these artists, in particular, some of the older artists, had a strict policy that they were not going on stage till they'd been paid in cash. There was no checks, there was no wire, it was cash.
So like a briefcase with $35,000 in it?
Yes.
Okay.
So I remember thinking, how are we going to get this money? And that's when we actually started to use outlets like Compact Music, Record Runner, Steve's Music, because we could get that cash from the vendors. It wasn't going through the Ticketmaster system. So we started to, that year, preemptively sell tickets. So we were gathering cash together, but a significant amount of it was at the gate. There was no digital payments. So it was all cash at the gate. And of course, the biggest source of revenue still was our beer sales. So I remember figuring out, look, the problem is that back then, there wasn't a lot of place to get cash on the weekend, US cash. So there was a currency exchange on Spark Street, and there was a currency exchange in the Rideau Center. And I had a relationship with these people to call them up, and I said, look, we were short about $10,000. And I said, we're going to need $10,000 on the day. Our last resort was the airport, because they were charging us through the nose. But I remember watching the beer sales. He went on a little late that night, because we were doing an airport run to get the final few $1,000s in USD. And they would not go on until they had that money. And I said, look, we're going to get it. And we did.
So you had to take money from the beer sales from that day, go to the airport and swap it for U.S. cash, and then bring it back give it to Ray Charles, and then Ray Charles
Yeah.
goes on stage.
And I mean, look, I liked 20s, but that night we were resorting to 5s and 10s because I needed every dime I could get.
Wow, great story. So what do you think it takes to build a successful festival? And I'll broaden that to say, you know, Bluesfest is a not-for-profit organization, but you function as a business. It's just your profits are not distributed to shareholders. They're reinvested in what you do every year. They're reinvested in your team and in future events and infrastructure and that sort of thing. So what does it take to build a successful organization and a successful event like Bluesfest? What are the ingredients?
I think you make a good point. Look, it's a great question because there is a distinction, obviously, between a not-for-profit and a for-profit enterprise. I think the difference is that obviously we're both running a business, but we can invest money in things that are not necessarily going to go right to the bottom line immediately. So it's taking a longer vision of where to put your money. And in our case, what we decided is to invest it in people. And in the festival business, there aren't a lot of assets. Generally, people don't buy barricades and buildings. So what we did is we invested money. Like I say, we have 18 full-time people. Our goal initially was to try and build a business, a stable environment for our employees in a very unstable business environment of the festivals. So we, in 2010, actually said, okay, if someone was working as an accountant in private enterprise or in larger not-for-profits, what would they be earning? And we benchmarked all of the positions at that time in our organization and made sure people were making commensurate money than they would in the private sector. And then what we did is we actually built a program an RSP matching program so people could save for their future. And we decided to make it the best program we had seen, which was 7% of your salary. So we matched 7% of everyone's salary if they invested in their RSP, and we put it into an RBC program that they controlled. And last year, which is one of the proudest moments I have, is that we were able to put aside money to create a retroactive pension program patterned after the federal pension program, public service, so that all of our staff retroactively now will have a lifetime pension based on their years of service, as anyone would have in the public service.
Amazing. That's the way you talk, and you and I were speaking yesterday to prepare for this event, the way you talk about your team and your people, and for you to say, for example, that one of your proudest moments was being able to give a pension. I mean, you could have all kinds of, and I'm sure you do have all kinds of proud moments associated with shows that you put on, but to say one of your proudest moments is being able to give your team that kind of security for their financial future really says a lot about how much you value them.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, in playing the long game, and this actually is a good example at COVID, all of our staff were kept on, full salary throughout COVID, and I think that's one of the reasons we came out of COVID in such a great place. I think those that did lay off staff, and many did in the festival industry, had a hard time picking up the pieces. We didn't skip a beat. I mean, we had a phenomenal year in 22 and 23, mainly because we kept our team together. So it's having that time to build something that the return is not immediately. Sometimes it's a year or 2 or 3 years down the road.
In addition to investing in people, how have you maintained a level of excellence at Bluesfest? Because one of the tough things about a business like yours, or the restaurant business, or the entertainment business, is you know, you can put on a great event one year, but the following year you've got to make it even more exciting, and then the next year you got to make it even more exciting. You have to keep bringing new aspects to it, more successful artists, more appealing artists. You you have to keep improving and you can never rest. So how have you managed to do that?
One way is just recognizing what is driving the business. Primarily, what's driving the business are the artists that we bring in. And I think our approach, our programming team's approach, is to maintain a network of other presenters. So I talked about Milwaukee Summerfest. We also have a group that includes the Calgary Stampede, the Quebec City Festival. We have a London festival, the Cavendish Beach Music Festival. Those of you here may not always look at their lineup, but if you do, you'll see some similarities because we generally work together. We have a call every couple of weeks with a bunch of these promoters, and we just talk music. We talk about artists that we brought in that maybe they want to, or vice versa. So really, first of all, it's the product. And what we try to do is, given our budget, what we have to spend, try to field the best lineup that we can, given the resources. And then the second part of it is building our local community support, which includes, we have generally 1/3 of all artists are local bands, so 50 local bands that are on the stages every year. We have over 2,000 community volunteers. And we have roughly 30 to 35 corporate sponsors, many of them from the local community.
Relationships are also important in this business. Relationships, as you just described them, with other festivals, with promoters, but also with all the stakeholders in the local community. When you put on an event like this, you've got to work with the city, with the police service, with sponsors, with other partners. So how do you manage those relationships and keep all those stakeholders on side and happy?
I think a lot of people face challenges, as do we. And our approach has always been to look at this problem and figure out what you have. What do you have you can work with? One of the things very early on was we always had a lot of volunteers who wanted to commit to working at the festival. A lot of them are music fans, but again, learning from others, and in particular some folks at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, their whole strategy was around a volunteer base. And what they said, and the gentleman I was talking to at the time said, is don't underestimate the power of your volunteer network. And it's easy to see. And I was just at a festival in the States, and I was talking to them about what they do for volunteers, and they said, well, we have a great volunteer program. Volunteers show up, and we ask them, we give them a garbage bag, and they pick up garbage, and if they pick up 3 bags of garbage, then they get a free ticket to the rest of the festival. I said, that's interesting. Well, that's not a volunteer program. And very early on, we realized that volunteers want to help, but they want to have meaningful work to do. And I met someone earlier here who was a supervisor at the bike park. We have a phenomenal team of volunteers. All of those volunteers have friends and family. A lot of them work for local businesses. They are our champions. And what I realized the second year, I had someone come to me from Mitel at the time. His name was Ian Chadsey. He was the investor relations person, and he was a closet drummer and a huge music fan. He said, Mark, I love what you're doing with Bluesfest, with this festival. It could have so much potential, but where are your corporate sponsors? And I said, well, that's a good question. I haven't got around to that yet. And he said, I'd like to help you. And he came and worked throughout the year and developed, he was doing investor relations, so he put a PowerPoint presentation together. He went around with me to see potential sponsors, and Mitel was the first sponsor. They gave us $5,000 in the second year and became critical in helping us attract others. And I realized through that relationship that there's a lot of power in the group of volunteers if you can mine that group and find out what these people do. A lot of our volunteers also work for the city, and they are our champions at the city. So it's creating a product that people will get behind and have an affinity for, beyond just buying a ticket to a concert.
And did Mitel pay you in cash?
No.
Okay. So I want to talk in a moment about the future of our city and the future of music in our city and tourism and festivals. But are there any other stories you can share with us beyond the Ray Charles story, the Clarence Clemens story? And are there favorite moments that you've had? I know Councillor Tierney is going to want you to say Nickelback, but please don't indulge him. But are there any favorite moments you've had where you were just able to step back and say, wow, I can't believe this is happening, this artist or this moment or something behind the scenes that occurred?
Yeah, I mean, people always ask, hey, have you got any great stories about people, the riders? People want to know what, the artists want for the riders. I'll tell you a couple of funny stories. One is we had KISS, I'm going to say in 2010, 2010. KISS came in, and they were quite an ordeal to work with. But one of my staff came to me at one point and said, hey, Mark, have you looked at this rider? And I said, no. And they said, well, you better look at, the third page or whatever. And I looked at it, and they wanted enough oxygen for all of the band members. Because they said, look, we're getting old. And so we had to bring in oxygen tanks for them backstage, which I thought was very interesting. Forget the M&Ms, give me oxygen. The other story, which is actually a great story, is we face a lot of times headliners who really respect their privacy. And less people want to do meet and greets, and they often come up with sort of flimsy excuses for this. But several years ago, we did the Foo Fighters, and I have to say, when we talked to the management, they said, Mark, the band is going to be the easiest you're going to ever have to deal with. Dave Grohl, he wants to have an open backstage. A lot of time the headliners want to have everything closed off. He said there's no restrictions on local bands, anyone who's back there. Open it up. He wants to meet any of the local artists, anyone who's around. He wants to come and hang out. And that was really refreshing. So there's artists like that. Bjork was another one. She came in with her daughter the day before. For those of you who know Joe Riley, he's been a long-time publicist with us. Joe went and took them on a hike in the Gatineaus. So having people come in and actually appreciate the city is always nice, because you think, a lot of times you approach artists and say, well, welcome to the city, and say, well, where am I? They don't know. So, a couple of stories.
Yeah, that's great. So, what can we do better as a city? How can we build on the success of Bluesfest and many of the other events we have in our city? How can we build on the tourism infrastructure that we've built and the success we've achieved? Where do we go from here? What would you advise us?
Well, if you ask the average festival, everyone's going to say, well, give us more money, okay? Which is fine, but...
In cash.
Yeah, in cash. But I think one of the things is just creating an environment, a supportive environment. And it's not always about money. Sometimes it's about advocacy. So, as I said, we have a lot of champions within the city, but sometimes we run into people who are just trying to do their job. And often they're not seeing a longer-term vision of what we're trying to achieve. And I think, and we do the same. We might say, oh, my God, what about these regulations and these forms? And sometimes we don't recognize why that's important. And I would say it works both ways. So just encouraging an open discussion, which I think, for the most part, we're able to do. But I do, hear some frustration at times from other events and so on. So just trying to promote the message and the open communication about, again, how important the festivals are, and advocating also from the corporate community, to get involved. And it isn't just about philanthropy, it's about building a better city.
Absolutely. And the music scene in Ottawa has changed a lot since 1994. We're seeing new performing spaces that are going to be opening in the next year or so in Ottawa. Are you excited about where that's going and how Ottawa has evolved as a music city?
Absolutely. I think the opening of the History, the new club with Live Nation, and soon the Rito Carlton or the Hard Rock is opening. Any clubs that are opening with significant investments behind them is only going to be good for the city. As I said, we work, sometimes with the folks in Montreal and Eventco. Eventco is interesting because they run the Bell Center, but they also have, I think, 5 to 10 local clubs, all at different levels. And often what we talk about is they say, look, a band builds an audience not by coming in and playing the arena. They build it by starting at the club, the 200-seat club, and going up through the ranks. And we haven't always had a strong club presence to evolve those bands. And people say, oh, well, they always play Toronto and Montreal and they skip Ottawa. Well, partly because there wasn't a place to play or people who were able to bring them in. And I think that is going to help. All of this is going to help. There's a phenomenal appetite for live music in this city and elsewhere. And I think that will bode well for all of us in the festival business.
Just as a little personal aside, I wanted to mention something because I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I interviewed you on my radio show, not about Bluesfest, but you went to Carleton, as you mentioned earlier, but you didn't graduate at the time, and then you actually went back and took the courses you needed to complete your degree literally like 5 or 6 years ago, which I was really impressed by and inspired by because I went to Carleton, and I didn't graduate, and I still don't have my degree. So I didn't go back and finish. Maybe someday after this. But I was really impressed by that. What made you want to go back and finish that, even though your career was well underway and you didn't need a university degree to get the next job or meeting or anything like that?
No, it's interesting you asked that. There were 2 things. One is I have 4 adult daughters. One of my daughters was going to graduate from Carleton the year after. And
you wanted to beat her?
Well, it was a nagging thing, as you know, in the back of my mind that why didn't I finish? And it was sort of nagging. And then the thing that really put me into action was a gentleman many of you know named Dave O'Malley, who runs Aerographics, who's been basically volunteering his services. Don Masters is here too, I think, today. Don has been a sponsor and offering Media Plus services for 30 years. So, I mean, phenomenal. Thank you, Don, and everyone. But Dave called me up and he says, Mark, I just graduated. I never finished my architecture degree at Carleton. And he said, I never realized I could go back. And someone pushed me to do this. And he goes, I heard you didn't graduate. And he said, call this woman in the admissions office, and she'll dig up your record and tell you what you need to do. And I did. And that was just the push I needed. I needed 3 courses. And she told me exactly what I needed to graduate, and I took the 3 courses and I graduated. So
very cool. Congratulations. So you have a great team. You don't have to do everything yourself. Do you have moments now where you're able to, during Bluesfest, stand there, take a look around at the crowd, see an amazing artist, internationally renowned artist on stage who would not be coming to Ottawa if it were not for you and your team and Bluesfest on a beautiful, warm summer night in Ottawa, and fully appreciate what you've done?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard for me probably to sit through a whole show, but I am struck, again, by the crowds and the enthusiasm for certain performers. And still, to this day, I marvel at some of the iconic blues artists that we still bring in. And I know people, give us a hard time on the blues front, but we have, I still believe that some of the blues artists that we bring in, Kingfish Ingram is one we're bringing this year, are phenomenal performers, charismatic, extremely capable performers that really turn people on. And it's still those smaller performances that I think, you know, resonate with me and a lot of the fans.
Well, I'm glad you get a chance to appreciate what you've built because, you know, there are many things we can do, many roles we can perform where, you know, you can take pride in your work, but if you weren't there, you know, someone else would have done it. But without you and your vision 30 plus years ago, there would be no Bluesfest in Ottawa. And so I think you should be extremely proud of what you've built and what it's done for our community, the impact it's had on our city. As I said earlier, it's impossible to imagine Ottawa now without Bluesfest. So we're incredibly grateful to you for your vision and your leadership and for the amazing festival that you've built for our community. Thank you,
Thank you
Mark.
so much, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Monahan.
Mark, on behalf of the Mayor, the Board of Trade, and OBJ, thank you so much for being here this morning. That was the best stories I've heard all week long. They were wonderful and build up, I think, in myself and many, just such a strong sense of community pride for what we can build in Ottawa with a little bit of cash, a little bit of vision. And I also want to say, you know, as we think about city building, and the City Building Summit that I know many of you participate in annually. This year, under Aaron, where's Aaron Benjamin? Where's Aaron? Aaron's leadership, we also hosted a panel, including Mark, including the folks from Live Nation and the Hard Rock, to talk about the economic impact of this sector on our city, and really thinking as we look at energy, infrastructure, the visitor economy, how important it is to our city. So not just you being an icon in this sector, but also being an iconic city builder as well, Mark. So we really appreciate that. So we have a little gift to present to you today from Eamon Hardin. So I'm going to call on Jock Cleamy to come up and present that to you. Did I say that right? Climby. Sorry, John. Thank you again. Okay, so we have a wonderful door prize to present today from the Casino Hilton Lac Limi, $100 in casino dollars that can be used over the complex. So we have a draw here. Thor Simonson, are you here? Good, okay. And we have that here. And then I want to also call on Noah from the Ottawa Sens to come up and present their door prize, which is a signed hockey stick. Maybe Noah, I'll let you draw the prize.